The room smelled like antiseptic and cold metal. A clock swept in perfect circles above the sink, pretending time was gentle. Daniel's elbow touched mine on the crinkling paper, that casual closeness he performs in public, and then the doctor glanced at the screen and went pale, as if someone had unplugged him from the wall. "Are you sure you're his wife?" he asked, voice soft, words barbed. My mouth said yes. The part of me that keeps score of tiny hurts asked why a stranger needed proof of what 20 years had already told. Daniel gave a bright, dismissive laugh. The sound of a coin flicked across a table. "Of course she is," he said, turning the grin he saves for pictures. The doctor's eyes did not change. He promised to double-check the panel and left the white coat hanging on the door like a flag. I stared. The coat felt kinder than the question. That morning, people called us Daniel and Mara, a hyphen earned with barbecues, PTA shifts, and a lawn the neighbors envied. The script was known. He is dependable, funny, slightly late. I am organized and the keeper of birthdays. Our children grew up on my lists and his jokes. Daniel squeezed my knee. "Babe, it's a mix-up. Labs mess up all the time." "All the time?" I asked, hearing my voice from a distance. I knew the thud of our garage at 10:43 p.m., the foreign laundry scent in his shirts, the way his gaze slid sideways when he said traffic. I had swept these seed-sized doubts to the floor with the back of my hand, because peace is cheaper than truth when the mortgage is in both names. The doctor returned with a paper he did not hand me. He gave it to Daniel, as if the question belonged to him. "We'll run a confirmatory panel," he said. No reason to panic. He checked our IDs, birthdays, addresses. Everything matched, except whatever had drained him earlier. "We'll be in touch," he said, and left again, carrying my certainty with him. In the parking lot, sunlight bounced across windshields like rumors. Daniel opened my door, always the gentleman choreography. "Lunch?" he asked, too cheerful. I nodded because marriages are small permissions and mine are muscle memory. We ate salads without tasting them. He told a quick story about a forgetful patient. I watched his hands. The ring I chose at a mall kiosk flashed between gestures. At home, Daniel napped like a man certain of innocence. I cleaned counters and folded towels. The question walked through the house, touching the backs of chairs, pausing at photographs. "Are you sure you're his wife?" Wife, a word with 1,000 chores attached. Lunches packed, appointments kept, smiles prepared. I was sure of all the labor. I was no longer sure of the title. That night I sat in the guest room with my phone, the blue light a little moon I orbited. I searched terms I'd never needed. Non-paternity event, chimera, transplant mismatch, lab error, false positive. Others were blunt. Sometimes tests say what no one wants to hear. I imagined truth as an object you set on the counter and circle. Did this belong to us? Memories unspooled. The anniversary charge at a restaurant across town. "Clients," he said, pressing his lips to my hair. The 2 calls from an unknown number that hung up when I answered. The way he started taking certain texts on the porch, squinting at the yard like he was admiring it. The scent on his collars, citrus, and something sweeter. I had chosen peace like a habit, a muscle I could flex while cooking ziti and paying bills. At 2 a.m, the house felt like a cathedral I no longer believed in. I stood in the door and watched him sleep, his face younger, untroubled by the stories grown men tell. I wanted to wake him and pour my searches into his mouth like medicine. I wanted to shake him until the ring slid off and rolled into the dust with the pennies and popcorn and whatever luck we had left. Instead, I whispered, "Who are you really, Daniel?" The refrigerator answered with its ordinary hum. Dawn came pink and ordinary. I brewed coffee strong enough to scald doubt. Daniel walked in, hair mussed, voice warm. "Morning," he said as if the question had dissolved. He kissed my shoulder. "You okay?" "I will be," I said, which is not the same as yes. He checked his watch and performed lateness. "I'll call the clinic, get this sorted." He wanted to be the hero stepping into paperwork to rescue me from fear. I let him keep the costume. "Good," I said, tasting how bitter the word can be. After he left, the house exhaled. I sat at the table with my palms flat, listening to the quiet clock. Every minute held two versions, the picture we showed and the negative developing. I thought about the day our son broke his arm and Daniel held him, steady as a tree, about our daughter's first apartment and the way he insisted on checking every window. The doctor's words echoed like a bell in a fogged harbor. "Are you sure you're his wife?" I answered myself with the things I could count. Casseroles delivered, fundraisers co-chaired, mortgage payments met, birthdays remembered, Christmas lights untangled, the small mercies nobody sees. Marriage is a ledger. I had filled every column. By lunchtime, I knew two things. First, I would not throw the question away like a receipt. Second, I would not ask it aloud, not yet. I would wait, watch, gather. If the truth was living in my house, it would leave footprints, and I would learn how to see them. The phone lay between us like a sleeping animal. When it finally rang, I was ready to hear the voice that would change the name of what we were. The morning after Daniel left for work, I opened my laptop and felt the hum under my fingertips like a pulse. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, just that something was already waiting for me, crouched behind the normal. The doctor's question had turned into a living thing, whispering through the house, coiling around my thoughts. "Are you sure you're his wife?" I started small. The insurance portal. My name, his name, our shared policy. Routine at first glance. But then, an odd line item caught my eye. A supplemental plan I'd never seen, listed under his personal email, billed to a different address in the same city. The claim history showed a pediatrician visit, recent. My stomach lurched. Pediatrician. We had no young children. I clicked it again and again, hoping the screen would blink and correct itself. Instead, I saw it plainly. Daniel's signature, neat and confident. Next to another woman's name, primary guardian, Emily Rhodes. Rhodes, a name like a road you shouldn't have taken. I printed the page, hands shaking. A part of me still clung to rationalization. Maybe it was a clerical error. Maybe he was helping someone out. That's how denial dresses up, tidy and polite. Then came the spiral. I opened our shared credit card statements, scrolling backward. Hotel charges in a town 40 miles away, repeating like a heartbeat. One weekend a month for nearly 5 years. Same amount, same location. He'd always said conferences, continuing education weekends. I remembered the tanned skin when he returned, the smell of chlorine and perfume that wasn't mine. It wasn't that I hadn't noticed before. I had just in fragments. But love teaches you to blur the lines that would ruin the picture. As the evidence piled up, so did the memories that now glowed red with warning. The nights he called me overdramatic for asking simple questions. The way he'd tilt his head with practiced patience, say, "After all I do for this family, you still don't trust me?" And watch me fold. I used to think I was patient, forgiving. I realize now I was trained. I pulled out a box from the closet, old receipts, insurance cards, tax files. He'd always insisted on handling the complicated stuff. He said I had enough on my plate with the house, the kids, and keeping things nice. The more I read, the more the mask cracked. A second cell phone number on a business form. A lease for an apartment in the city signed in his name 2 years ago. Mail redirected to a P.O. box I never knew existed. Every piece of paper was a small betrayal wearing bureaucracy's face. Flashbacks swam up like ghosts. The time he missed our daughter's graduation because of a patient emergency. The night he called from a hotel because of a late seminar. His voice muffled, the sound of a child giggling faintly in the background. I had dismissed it. Children were everywhere, I told myself. It could have been the TV. Guilt tastes metallic when it's your own. I found myself cataloging the lies by flavor. The sweet ones meant to soothe, the sharp ones meant to cut. The ones said with a smile. By the third day, I stopped shaking. The fear calcified into something colder, cleaner. My empathy, once a weakness, became a blade. If he could live 2 lives, so could I. One that pretended to believe, and one that prepared. I started documenting. Every receipt, every password I found scribbled on Post-it notes. I synced his work calendar to my phone under the guise of helping with scheduling. I even recorded our conversations, the casual ones at dinner where he'd explain his long hours. He liked to hear himself talk. I liked the sound of his lies getting trapped in my device. A week later, I tested him. Over dinner, I mentioned casually, "The doctor's question has been on my mind." He froze, fork midair. Then he smiled, the kind of smile meant to tame. "Oh, Mara, are we still on that?" "Still?" I said, voice light. He looked frightened, Daniel. Why would he ask that? He set down his fork, tone slipping into that familiar condescension. "You're spiraling again. You do this, remember? You latch onto things. You've always been." He paused, searching for the word that would keep me small. "Hysterical?" I offered. His jaw tightened. "I was going to say sensitive. You twist everything into drama." It was his default setting, when cornered, accused me of overreacting. It had worked for years. Not this time, I leaned forward. "You told me once the truth doesn't scare good men." His eyes flickered, panic, brief as lightning. Then he laughed, cold and sharp. "You're unbelievable." He shoved back his chair and stormed out. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the picture frames. I sat there, heart hammering, spoon still in my hand. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a verdict. I thought of every time I had bent to his comfort. Every time I apologized for asking too much, for feeling too much. He had mistaken kindness for blindness. That night, I decided, if I was going to fall, I'd make sure he went first. When he finally came home after midnight, I pretended to be asleep. He slipped into bed without a word. The scent of perfume, floral, expensive, clung to him like guilt that didn't want to wash off. The next morning, I made coffee and kissed him goodbye. My voice was calm. My hands were not. Once he was gone, I opened his laptop. He'd grown careless, too confident. Maybe he believed I wouldn't dare. But curiosity is stronger than fear once betrayal hardens it. His email was open to a draft, an insurance renewal form. Attached was a PDF labeled Dependent Coverage, Rhodes. I clicked. Inside, I saw it all. The woman's name again, Emily Rhodes, listed as domestic partner. Beneath it, a child's name, Ethan Rhodes Davis, age 5. Davis. His last name, the child's birth date, March 2019, the year he'd been traveling for a fellowship. The same year our son had graduated high school, and I'd spent those nights alone in a quiet house, missing him, trusting him. My breath hitched. 5 years old. A lifetime built behind my back. I scrolled through the file again, reading until the words blurred. The policy address matched the one from the supplemental plan. Apartment 3B, Laurel Street, a 20-minute drive from our home. The final line sealed it. Primary care physician, Dr. Alan Grant. The same doctor who had asked me, "Are you sure you're his wife?" The realization struck so hard I almost laughed. The medical test wasn't an error. It was proof, a mismatch not between husband and wife, but between one life and another. He hadn't been hiding an illness. He'd been hiding them. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick with years of swallowed trust. The woman he lied to, the child carrying his name, it wasn't just betrayal. It was an entire world he'd built parallel to mine. I closed the laptop and stared at my reflection in the dark screen. The wife he paraded at holidays, the perfect partner in photos. I wasn't real to him. I was a prop, a cover story, a decoy wife, and for the first time in 20 years, I stopped feeling afraid. The fear had done its job. Now it was time for something else to take its place. Daniel didn't know that by the time he finally confessed, I already had the truth. He sat at our kitchen table, face drawn with counterfeit regret, rehearsing sincerity like a script he'd read too many times. I listened in silence. It was almost disappointing. After all that deceit, this was how small his courage turned out to be. When he was finished, he waited for me to scream, to crumble. He'd prepared for the spectacle of a broken wife. Instead, I stood up, smoothed the sleeve of my blouse, and said quietly, I already know. His face flickered, shock, then fear, then fury. He began to sputter excuses about mistakes and complicated emotions. I watched his mouth move, detached. Somewhere between betrayal and recovery, my heart had stopped answering to him. That night, I didn't cry. I opened a new notebook, the one where I'd kept every document, every screenshot, every receipt, and wrote across the first page. Evidence equals freedom. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. She was sharp-eyed, efficient, and exactly the kind of woman Daniel used to call intimidating. I laid everything out in front of her, the insurance forms, the emails, the photos of the apartment lease. She scanned them silently, then said, "You have him cornered, and you have a choice. Destroy him quietly or publicly." I remember breathing out, slow. "He taught me something," I said. "Silence protects the liar, not the loyal." The plan took form with surgical precision. I learned that revenge doesn't always come with shouting. It comes with strategy. The first step wasn't confrontation. It was connection. I called Emily Rhodes. Her voice on the other end was cautious, trembling. She thought I was a telemarketer or worse, one of Daniel's patients. I spoke softly. "I think we need to talk. About Daniel Davis." There was a pause so long I could hear her heartbeat in the silence. Then quietly she said, "You know, we met at a small cafe halfway between our worlds." She was younger than me by at least a decade, tired in a way I recognized. She wore no wedding ring, only a delicate chain around her neck. I saw my own history in her, the hope, the trust, the eventual doubt. When I slid the printed insurance form across the table, she covered her mouth. "He told me you were divorced," she whispered. "And he told me you didn't exist," I said. We didn't cry. We didn't scream. We just sat there, two women divided by one man's deceit, finally united by truth. That meeting became the hinge on which everything turned. Together, we filed our legal actions, joint petitions for divorce and custody, financial exposure, insurance fraud reports. The web Daniel had spun now tangled him. Every lie now had paperwork attached. When the story broke, because it did, it wasn't an accident. The local newspaper ran a piece about a respected physician under investigation for insurance falsification. Then, a post appeared online accompanied by two photos, one of me, one of Emily, both smiling faintly, captioned simply, "He built 2 homes on borrowed truth. The community that once adored him turned cold." Invitations vanished. His practice, once bustling, grew quiet. People whispered at the grocery store. Neighbors stopped waving. For years I had lived in his shadow. Now he was the ghost. I didn't rejoice. The satisfaction wasn't in his fall. It was in my clarity. I moved into a small apartment near the river, the kind of place where silence sounded like peace instead of punishment. The first night there, I slept with the windows open, listening to the hum of the city and the freedom between my breaths. Rebuilding was less about revenge and more about reclamation. I updated my resume, walked into my old field, and found work at a community clinic. Ironic, maybe, but perfect. I spent my days helping women who came in with bruises they hid behind makeup and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. At first, the quiet evenings felt hollow. I kept reaching for habits that no longer had a place, checking his schedule, cooking for 2. But slowly, the emptiness became space. I learned to enjoy the small rituals. Morning coffee poured into my favorite mug, buying flowers for no reason, leaving dishes in the sink without apology. I cut my hair, changed my last name, and started using my own again. Mara Pierce. The name tasted clean, like something earned. Some nights, Emily would text me a photo of her son playing in the park. "He looks more like him every day," she'd write. And I'd reply, "Let him look like him. Just never be him." Months passed. I could almost feel my old self shedding in layers. There was no single moment of triumph, just a slow, steady blooming of peace. One morning, almost a year after it all began, I went back to the same hospital. This time, it was for a routine checkup. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. Just me, finally tending to myself. The same doctor walked in. For a second, he didn't recognize me. I was thinner, lighter, maybe even glowing. Then he smiled, a little surprised. "You look healthy," he said. "Lighter," I smiled back. "I am." He nodded knowingly, no words needed. The room felt different, warmer, brighter. The place where my world had cracked was now just another stop on the road I'd rebuilt. On the drive home, I rolled down the windows and let the air whip through my hair. There was a time when I thought justice had to look like punishment. Now I understood, it looks like peace. When I reached my apartment, I placed the last piece of my old life, the wedding photo, into a box. Not out of hatred, but closure. I didn't need to burn it or break it. I simply didn't need it anymore. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the same way I had every morning since I left him, and sat by the window. Outside, the world was still messy, unpredictable, alive. I watched it without fear. For the first time in decades, I didn't wonder where Daniel was, or who he was lying to. He'd become irrelevant to my story. I was no longer someone's wife, someone's cover, someone's secret. I was my own witness, and in that realization, everything, the humiliation, the discovery, the rage, transformed into something almost holy. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. Because trust, once broken, doesn't only show you who betrayed you, it shows you who you were always meant to become. Some truths destroy the life you had. Others give you the strength to build the one you deserve. Comment below. What would you have done if you were in my place? Confront him or walk away in silence? If stories like this hit close to home, follow for more true life dramas of betrayal, survival, and strength.